Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the HeelanHub podcast, the show for small business owners. I'm Dan Heelan, and on today's show, I wanted to talk to you about Xero, the accounting software. The main reason being is that we've seen a lot of owners not using all of the features, and I think it was a cool time just to come on the podcast and talk about how you might use all the features in there to maximize your business. Now, you could, even if you're not a Xero user, these things are in other apps. So you might think, okay, there's still something to be learned here, even if you're not. But I suspect if you've clicked on the title, you're already a Xero user or thinking of being. And it's going to be a really cool thing to be able to talk about what we see, because it's painful sometimes. You see someone using it and you're like, why are you not doing this? But of course, no one teaches you this stuff. So it'd be really cool just to talk about it on the podcast, highlight some areas, and hopefully you can take away then something that you can go and use in your business. So let's get on with it. Now, clickbaity kind of title of this podcast out of the way, the chances are you're not doing it all wrong. It is very much that actually most people do have a good time using it. It's just there's some things you're like, I wish you'd do it this way and you'd have a much better time. So we see those common themes with small business owners. I just want you from the podcast just to be able to think, do you know what, one of these features is something I can go and start to use, because the software is so, big. You've got so many things you can do, things you can plug into it. I just want you to take away one thing, hopefully. So then when we talk about features, we can't go anywhere else but start with the bank feed and the bank rec, as it's often known in the industry. And that's that Xero has this capability to bring in your bank statement line by line on a daily basis from your bank, and that's known as the bank feed. And then the bank transactions will come into Xero. You can go in and you can just categorize them. Like there's a left column and a right column, and you go in and you tell it in the right column what the left column is. So, that was a sandwich at Starbucks when I was traveling to a temporary workplace. And actually, I am VAT registered, so I can go in there and tell it what to do with the VAT, whether I'm claiming it or not. And that process of going down that bank feed on the right-hand side and categorizing it all is going to be the main part of most people's bookkeeping. And of course, because there's AI style intelligence in there, if you've done things before where you've quite often gone to that place and it's subsistence, or you have done that transaction before and it's software, it'll start to guess. And sometimes it's as simple as just pressing the OK button that pops up in the middle, but obviously check before you do that. What you can also do is you can set up rules inside the system. They call them bank rules, surprisingly. And you can set criteria and say, if you see this in the future, tell me about it. And I might just be able to press OK, basically. So you can say, look, if you see Barclays every month and it says something to do with charges, suggest to me that it could be bank charges. And I can just press OK and it will categorize it to bank charges for you automatically. And as I say, the AI does some of that, but the bank rules can help in certain situations. Sounds easy, right? That's it. But a lot of people just aren't using it. So in the old days, and for people who don't use it, what people are doing is they're manually adding each transaction. And that's just crazy. Now, even if you don't have a feed, you might have a weird bank. The odd bank doesn't have a feed for whatever reason. None of the main banks would have this issue, but some of the odd ones do. You can normally download a spreadsheet export from your bank and then import it, and it will look identical to a feed. It's just you've got that one manual step in. It doesn't just come in line by line. Because in an ideal world, you'd want to do it daily. Just go in there and just, if you only have a couple of lines a day, clear them down regularly. I think we've done loads of podcasts on daily financial habits. And to me, that would be one. Go in, clear down those bank transactions. If you're doing the bookkeeping yourself, if you're a small startup, something like that, then you're going to do that yourself. Or maybe you just spend those 5 minutes pinging stuff to your bookkeeper to them to sort out as well. And, there's a Xero study that shows it saves something like 5.5 hours a week doing it. I'd say it could be even longer, depending on how many transactions you got in the bank. But honestly, it's the number one feature. When people say, what's better, Xero or QuickBooks? The reason people will often say Xero is because that one feature alone. So if you take nothing else from this podcast, make sure you go away and make sure you've activated that bank feed and that you're using it and that you're using the tech and using the rules and things to really help do that. Because it will do certain things. It will suggest certain matches, and sometimes that's good as well. We'll talk about that in the next feature, which is receipt capture. And when I say receipt capture, I also mean it's just a way of, doing what it says, I guess, getting receipts into the system. Sometimes it can be manual paper receipts. Sometimes it can be emailed, invoiced PDF. So taking that bank feed a step further, for best practice, you'd want to capture your receipts and invoices inside the software. Now, I think this is particularly important if you're VAT registered, because you're going to need those receipts. Or even more important, to just an overall picture, if you've paid for a business transaction that's not coming out of your bank. So say you bought something with personal funds or personal cash, you're out using that example we just said, you're traveling and you bought your lunch because you're at a temporary workplace, and that's fine. Let's presume it's fine. and you buy it at the till and you lob it in your pocket or you lob it in the bin and you just forget about it, you've lost that tax deduction. And it's very easy to lose those deductions by not capturing a receipt. And if you've listened to all the podcasts that I've done and talked about any of the content that you've seen me talk about, I've talked about this all along, and that's the number one tax saving tip, is to keep good records. And it's based on this practical challenge. So generally, 2 ways you can set up this receipt and invoice capture. I think the first one is to use Xero's inbuilt feature, and the third one is to add a third-party app to your workflow. And I've seen success on both, so I think it's worth us spending a little bit of time just talking about them. And the chances are, if you're listening to this in the podcast, you think I could do with seeing this in action, go to our YouTube channel. If it's not already there, there'll be a video on this as well, so you can see this in a bit more detail. I'm talking about the main Heelan Associates YouTube channel. If you're watching me at HeelanHub talking about this on the podcast, you need to quickly go to the other channel and see the sort of the screening. You can see it as we recorded some screens on that one. So a couple of things. So if you're using Xero's inbuilt one, you've got a couple of ways to get receipts or copy invoices into the system. And the most common ways we see, because there's a few ways of doing it, is one, when you have the transactions in front of you. So if you're on your bank feed, you can go add details, or if you're putting in a new bill, you can literally drag and drop your document from your computer onto that transaction, onto your browser screen, and it will attach it. And the little box on the top right, it appears in for later if everyone wants to see it. That's a really cool way of doing it. The other way, but obviously you need that on your desktop to be able to do it, or in your filing system. The second one is you can email the invoice or the receipt into a special unique email address, and then that will create a draft bill in the system. Now, to find the email address that you need, if you go to the business menu, and this is at the time of recording this podcast, this is how you would do it. You go to the business menu, click on bills to pay, and then you click on automate bill entry in the top right. There's probably some other way of finding it. It's just the way that I know. And then you can see a unique email address that you can copy, and you put that in your to, and you literally send it an email. And then anything arriving to that email address will arrive as a draft bill in the system, presuming, of course, the system can read it, and it include a picture of the bill. Now, if the format is clear, Xero will even attempt to automatically fill out like the prices, dates, references, name of the place that the invoice or receipt is from, and all that is going to save you a lot of time, but it does need human eyesight on it to check that it's right. I've seen a £1 million Asda receipt, for example, not that many years ago because the system read it wrong, so do check. The obvious downside to both those methods is you need to be at your computer, because you either need to email it in or you need to drag it from your desktop. Now, I suppose you could, in theory, email from your camera roll and things like that. So it's not entirely there that you can do that workflow. That would work. But most of the time you're using this, you've got it on your computer somewhere. Now, for on-the-go capturing, I think that there's a couple of ways of doing it. One is using that third-party app method that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But the other one is you can actually use the Xero app on your mobile. So there's an add a bill button, and you can literally take a photo from your mobile and attach it to the bill, and that's creating a bill inside of your Xero. So when you go to your desktop later to carry on doing your, most people, I think with Xero, tend to do it via your laptop or your computer. You'll be able to then deal with it there. But you can attach it certainly by using the app. Now, talking to the third-party apps, this one's a weird one because a lot of people look at the workflow and they think, why would I do this? I'm adding a thing in that workflow. But confession time here, being completely honest with you, at the moment of recording this podcast, we use third-party apps all the time, and we process hundreds of thousands of invoices every year in our bookkeeping team for clients. And this is the way we have our workflow set up. And that's that you add this app. So I won't detail how you do it in this podcast, as it will take too long. I just want to talk to you about the overall workflow. So you download the third-party app and you do this connection with Xero so it can transmit data. You then go and you snap all your pictures of your receipts while you're at the till. I annoy people all the time by doing this. While I'm at the till, I'm going to snap my receipt. And then you can either use the app to submit it. So most of these apps are just like camera apps, and they'll submit it to the app, or like up into the cloud, or you can email, again, exactly the same. It'll be a different email, but there'll be a unique email in, so you can send your PDF ones in. And then the difference is you log in online before doing your bank feed. You will normally log in online first to the third-party app and review the receipt in that screen. And the reason you do that is that there's various texts that will mean that you pre-populate most of the receipt. The vast amount of times it's going to be right, but it's not infallible for the same reason we just said from Xero's end, and you can do that. But most of them have really customizable rules and setups to make this very fast. So you can even set it so that it just you don't even need to see it. It will send it straight into Xero without looking. be wary of that one, but we probably do that for about 15% of receipts that we see at the moment. Things like our bills, we don't need to check our bills. We know what they are, and we know that the VAT treatment's always going to be the same. We can even tell it to split it in certain ways automatically, and it will go in. So you can do that as well. So you don't even have to look at that screen, but I would be careful of that. I know our bookkeepers sort of shudder when I suggest we should do more of that, but it's definitely an option. And then you go and reconcile your bank, because what it'll do is if it sees a transaction and says, look, there's a £10 from Starbucks at the bank and I got a £10 Starbucks receipt, it'll go green and say, do you want to match these two together? And you click OK. So it sounds long-winded, because you could just think, well, I could just do this from a bank feed. But if you want the receipts in, you want to capture them well, and you want the best technology set up, that's kind of the holy trinity at the minute of how you would do it. But honestly, I've seen people do it lots of different ways, and you can set it up however you want. So have a play with the features and have a look. But using a third-party app is good. If you're worried about cost of adding something there, so like Dext is a good one. Dext is a good third-party app we use. There's other ones out there, but HubDoc, Xero, your Xero license gives you access to HubDoc, which is a third-party app they bought that will do this. I'm not as much of a fan of that one, if I'm honest with you. I think there are better products, but it definitely does the job. So, and I'd rather you used an app than didn't use an app. So you can get that for free. It's still a separate app because you need it on your phone to snap, and you've still got a separate login to transmit it into Xero. And that sounds odd because they're owned by the same people, but it's that same workflow. You're going to deal with it in HubDoc, send it into Xero, and you can use the rules and the automation that HubDoc gives you to make that a bit quicker. So don't overlook that third-party app, because it honestly does add some cool features. Now, the next thing on the list would be electronic invoicing and statements. Might sound weird because you're like, surely everybody is going to invoice from these apps if you've got them. But actually, no, there's still a lot of people who will use, they'll use it for the bank feed and all the cool stuff we just said, reconciling it and capturing the receipts. But the sales end of it, they'll still be sending out Word docs or Excel docs or some craziness, which just makes me shudder. But some people like that and they've done it. But if I could encourage you to use Xero's invoicing feature, I think you'd have a great time. And you'd be surprised how many small businesses still continue on the old method. Now, having the invoices raised in Xero can not only help you get paid quicker, we've done other podcasts about how to get paid quicker using technology. But when bookkeep correctly can really help you keep an eye on who owes you what. There's a report called the Accounts Receivable Summary Report, which I'll touch on in a minute. There's also a dashboard that shows you live what people owe you. And I think that one is really worth having a look at and thinking, if I keep my bookkeeping up to date, I can literally see it in a snapshot. It could be something you can log into daily. I know morning routines, as I'm recording this podcast, are all the rage because there's some cool Instagramming. And my morning routine is very much then going in and looking at my figures. And I like the dashboard. So if your bookkeeping's regularly up to date, you can turn on automatic reminders to send these statements for sure. Send the invoices, but also the statements. So if you look at it and you're like, the people owe me money, I need to remind them, you can just send a statement to them really, really easy as well. So do that. Go and play with that feature. Now, you can turn on automated reminders as well if you really wanted to automate the process, but I would only tell you to turn that on if you do your bookkeeping daily, because there's nothing worse than getting an invoice that you, as a client or a customer, getting an email saying pay this invoice and you've paid it. It just seems almost like bad admin, doesn't it? So I tend to encourage clients to turn that off unless they're really sure they're going to do it every day. But that is an option there. Now, a final note is that some industries do prefer a third-party app. So some will use like Invoice to Go or whatever else. And a lot of these, and I don't know if Invoice to Go does, but mainly I see this with construction people. So they'll have like a certification app, say they're in a Sparky or something, and that will do the invoicing as well. But a lot of those have like an API connection to the software that creates a copy invoice inside of Xero. Absolutely do those connections. If you're using a third party, check it. It will connect to Xero, and then you can use both if you just like the other one because of its customizable features. So then the fourth thing I would say feature-wise is the dashboard we spoke about. Just a customizable area. They're always developing it, so I presume it's going to continue to get better. But when you first load into Xero, it's the screen you see. And it's a powerful tool for just taking stock of where you're at. For some, the control on there is good. You can just see what we're looking at. You can hide things that you don't want to see. And you can also create watch lists. So if you want to keep on how much, say you're spending lots of advertising, how much you're spending on advertising, you can literally put it on your watch list and see it on your dashboard. But I think that the most used parts are, it will show you, these are the bills I've got to pay. This is the amount of money I'm owed, and you can see some snapshot of that early. You can also see your bank balances because you will have activated your bank feeds, so you'll have your bank balances on there. You can see what's happening. There's a VAT bit that tells you where your VAT next return is, if your VAT registered and all that's connected properly. So it's just going to give you some key data health as well, like how many transactions you've still got to deal with in the banks and things like that. And if your bank feed needs renewing, that kind of stuff. So it's just a good all-round place to just visit on a frequent basis. Now, getting into that daily habit, as I said, I think we did other podcasts on this, but getting closer to the numbers, this is definitely one to make sure you go in and visit that dashboard regularly. Now then, I did throw in a sixth one. I'm going to talk about the fifth one now, but I did throw in a sixth one at the end just because when I was talking to the team about this, I'm like, you cannot do a podcast on this and not mention this other feature. So, but the fifth one would be reporting. And in conversations with clients, I think it's amazing that most of them barely touch this menu in the software. But there are some key reports to keep an eye on, really, and keep you in the know, I guess. And that's the accounts receivable summary. And that's the report that shows you per customer and client who owes you what money. And I think it's a good combination to look at that one. So quite often with your dashboard, the dashboard's okay and it will show you, but I prefer to read it in this report. And then you can start sending statements from your system and reminders, or maybe even picking up the phone or whatever else you want to do from your credit control point of view to chase those debts. And what I would say is if it looks untrue, you're like, no, that customer's definitely paid. It's a good indication that there's something up with your bookkeeping. The amount of things as accountants we get where this accounts receivable report is completely up the chute, and the client doesn't even realise. For you, definitely check it and make sure, is that reflective of today? Do these people really owe me this money? And then on the other side of that, you've got the accounts payable report, and that's the report that shows you per supplier who you need to pay. And again, if it looks incorrect, the one that always makes me laugh is there's like a £6 receipt from like Tesco's. Then they haven't given you credit terms. There's no way you still owe that £6. You need to deal with it somewhere in your bookkeeping. So go and have a look at that. But in general terms, if you have got things on account, it's a really good way just to keep an eye on who you owe money to, and also not add to the small business late payments problem we currently have by making sure you're paying your bills on time. And then if you want to get really into the numbers, we did other podcasts on these particular ones, but the profit and loss report's a good one. It just is a report showing, as it sounds, how much money over a certain period of time that you're making or not sometimes. And as I said, done other podcasts, go and check that out. But a word of warning as a reminder, if you are viewing that, some things like limited company dividends, investment in large equipment like your laptops, if they're book kept properly, things like that shouldn't often show on the profit and loss. So sometimes you might think, I'm making loads of money, and then you're not factoring in the money you're taking or something like that. And then finally, the other report, which I think is the most exciting report, but it's the most difficult one to kind of practically use, is the balance sheet. And that's a snapshot of the business at a certain date. And again, that one's probably too hard to describe in this already fairly long podcast, but go check out our other podcast on reading a balance sheet. But it's a really good kind of compilation, I guess, of where you are with the business. It shows you the good stuff that you own and the cash you have and the other assets. And then it will show you the liabilities, your tax, loan balances, things like that. All depending, of course, how good your bookkeeping is. And what you're hoping is that one is bigger than the other. So, but go and watch those and listen to those podcasts. Now, the sixth bonus one is the find and recode feature. So I said to you, the bookkeeping team particularly were really wanted me to come and talk about this one. And that's a tool that should be very much treated with care. So if you realise that you've made a mistake in your bookkeeping and you need a change, you've put 10 things to motor costs and it should have been materials or something, you can use the find and recode tool. So you go in and you set a transaction search. You say, like, show me between these dates everything that's in motor expenses, because I know I've put it in the wrong place. And you can tick the ones you want to change, and it will pop up a pop-up that says, what do you want to change? You can change where to categorize it, your VAT rate, and you can also change the contact name if you really need to. You click a button, it bulk changes them all, and that's it. Disaster averted. It's honestly the coolest tool. We use it quite frequently for recategorizing things where clients have maybe put stuff in the wrong place. So it's good, but also correcting our own work. We're not perfect either. So it's particularly handy though if you need to change your VAT code, if you're VAT registered, because in Xero, if you've applied a payment to a bill, you can't easily change the VAT code, but this kind of circumvents it and works. So definitely worthwhile. So to sum it up then, get your bank feeds connected in Xero. Make sure you're using that to reconcile it daily, hopefully, but as close as you can to as often as you can, and making sure that that matches your bank balance at any given time. Set up receipt capture workflow. Doesn't matter how you do it, play around with various options, see what works with you, but somehow get your receipts rolling in. Use the invoice function, send invoices, send statements, look at the dashboard for a snapshot of those key numbers, dig into the reports, particularly the ones where somebody owes you money and who you need to pay, and then you could send further statements based on those things. And if you've made a mistake or you want to change something, try and use that find and recode tool for ease, and that will make it much smoother. Now, if you haven't started your journey with Xero, you can actually get a great deal via our link. I know we've spoken about this probably before on the podcast, but HeelanAssociates.co.uk/Xero, and there's a deal for about 95% off at the time of recording. I think it is. It does vary, but it will be a very good deal. So go on there. It supports us, supports you, works very well. Now, that brings me to the end. So if you have enjoyed this podcast, if you would take a few moments to subscribe via your favorite app, that would be awesome. I know most of you come via Spotify, but there are lots of other avenues. You can also find us on YouTube at HeelanHub. It's a very new channel. We're just lobbing them up there just as an ease. We thought it probably fit best on there rather than on our main channel, but it allows you to interact with us in the comments and stuff a bit easier. So go on there. I'd love it if you've got anything to say, just go on there. Please do subscribe, share it with your friends. If you get 5 minutes on any of those apps that you find us on, if you can review us, subscribe, whatever, it helps us grow the show. So thanks very much for that. For more business insights and tax tips, be sure to connect with me or my great team on all the social media channels, including, of course, our main YouTube channel at Heelan Associates, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever. Hit me up. I'd love to talk to you on there as well. And if you want even more tax tips and business insight direct to your inbox, you can go to HeelanAssociates.co.uk, scroll around for a bit, you get a pop-up, put your email in, and you get an email direct to your inbox every 2 weeks on tax tips, insights, etc., etc. We don't sell your data. It's purely for that reason. That's it. If you want to get in touch about the podcast for anything, obviously you can talk on the YouTube channel or any of the social medias, but if you want to email in, you can go info@HeelanAssociates.co.uk. That's it. Have a profitable and tax efficient week, and I'll see you on the next one.